Morning is African Americans and slavery, and we're fortunate to have with us this morning to talk about African Americans and the institution of slavery and the impact not only of slavery during the time of slavery, but the impact that slavery has had in later years. With us is our guest for today, Miss Alana McLaughlin. And of course, Alana, let me welcome you to the show this morning. And I don't think I have to introduce you to our guest this morning because this is your 5th year with us. Many of our audience will recall that you started with us at the age of 8, and you've been with us since then. And we're just delighted to have you here with us this morning to talk about what we consider to be a very, very important topic, and to talk about a topic that I'm sure that you have a lot of information about because we've discussed it quite recently. Let's talk about, first of all, your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to us this morning, and then we'll talk about African Americans and slavery.
Well, like Dr. Haney already said, my name is Alana McLaughlin. I am only 13. Well, I turned 14 this year, but something that really led me to the show was the natural spark that I think that I was born with, that I inherited from you. As a child, I really loved to talk, act and dance around and stuff, and then I realized that I had a vocabulary that exceeded my years by far, and I had this natural kind of fearlessness in front of cameras and large audiences, and I really thought, and so did you think, that we could really put this to use by educating people on subjects that are commonly known, but with facts that aren't commonly known. And so that's really what led me to the show this morning, and now, about 6 or 7 years later, here I am.
Go on.
And so I'm only in the 8th grade right now, and I go to John Early Museum Magnet Middle. I'm heavily involved in my church and organizations such as the Junior National Young Leaders Conference and WKU's Gifted Program Center, and they have programs such as, the summer camp for verbally and mathematically precocious youth and the summer camp for academically talented students. And I've attended both, and they're very nice. I recommend them to anybody. And so I am also heavily involved in my school. I am a cheerleader, I'm in the debate club, the band, and I'm also a part of the Metro Honor Band. I play trumpet. And so I'm just heavily involved in anything I can really get into that can help me better myself and help me grow and mature.
And you're beginning your 5th year in a real sense with us on this particular show, and today you've decided to talk about African Americans and slavery. Let's start off by giving us some information in reference to African Americans and the institution of slavery, Alana.
Well, if you're not familiar with what slavery is, slavery was the mass torture and genocide in some sense of African Americans back during the 1800s. And basically, what a lot of people overlook is the fact that we have come so far from slavery, yet we're slowly slipping back into it. And I'll be elaborating more on this in the second segment, but for right now, I'm going to say this. At first, we were enslaved by different races, and now we're enslaving ourselves. And it's crazy, but when you really think about it, the actions we do and things like that are really pulling us back into history, because since people don't know it, we're bound to repeat it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so in a sense, Alana, you want to talk today about the institution of slavery that was introduced into this country, I think we've indicated, in 1619 and was ended in 1865, almost 300 years of that institution. And I think that you would like to talk about some aspects of that institution during this second segment, and to get our audience not only involved in understanding the institution, but also what African Americans especially, not only African Americans, but African Americans especially were concerned about it. And that's where we talk about the ending of the institution of slavery in 1865 with the end of the Abolitionist movement. And so you want to talk about African Americans and the Abolitionist movement, and what we'll do, we'll have you to start. What about the Abolitionist movement? Why don't you, we've got a minute before our first commercial break, why don't you say something about those individuals who wanted to end slavery?
Well, for every terrible thing that happens in history, there are always those few brave souls who fight against it or choose to tell their story. Like for the Holocaust, there was Anne Frank. For slavery, which I'm going to be talking about, there were people such as, Harriet Beecher Stowe and, David Walker. And for the Civil Rights Movement, there's Coretta Scott King, Dr. King, Malcolm X. And so that's mainly what I'm going to be talking about in the second segment and people like those brave souls.